Versus News today. My name is Kemini Nyamani Amano. Now, a year since the election petition, you recall political parties have been pushing the Electoral Commission to implement various electoral reforms here in the country as suggested. The ruling NDC, like other parties, think there are a lot of lessons that can be drawn from the 2012 landmark case at the Supreme Court. Johnson Asiedu Nketia is the General Secretary of the NDC and he's joined me over the telephone with his thoughts. Well, I understand we do not have him yet, so here's what we'll do. We'll move on to some other stories and then come back to it. Well, I understand we have Johnson Asiedu Nketia now. Thank you very much for joining us here.
You're welcome.
You had quite a share of the landmark case, and before we go on, what does it feel like a year afterwards?
Well, last night I was, reviewing memories of the event on that day in my mind, and I think that I could remember the tense situation in the country. I could remember my mother refusing to eat until the verdict is out and so on. And I could remember the security siege in Accra and Kumasi and the other places. But I remember very well that I was very, very cool. I wasn't scared. I wasn't expecting any other verdict apart from the verdict that we had, because I believe that elections are held and won or lost at the polling station, and so nobody else can change the verdict of the people. So I wasn't surprised that we had that verdict.
A year after that landmark verdict also, the question has been asked. So the lessons we learned from the eight-month long litigation, have we put those lessons to work? What would be your assessment?
I think that we have made progress on those lessons. The most important lesson has been the fact that everybody in the country now realizes that elections are won or lost at the polling station. And those who initiated the action themselves are on all platforms declaring that 2016 they are not going to court. They are going to make sure that they win the elections at the polling station. And I think that is very, very commendable on their part. The only question I have is that winning election at the polling station means that the rule of law is allowed to operate. Everybody who has a function to undertake at the polling station theater is allowed to undertake that function, so that all the transparency issues will be addressed there, and whatever comes out of the polling station will be accepted as a verdict of the people.
In spite of that, some believe that electoral reforms have not been achieved since the verdict.
Well, the problem is that they themselves, those who are alleging that electoral reforms have not been achieved, they have manufactured electoral reforms in their own thinking, which is completely not what the Supreme Court actually suggested. So they have put in issues like the reorganization of the Electoral Commission, the auditing of the Electoral Register and other things, which completely are not coming from the Electoral Commission. But they've created the public impression that these things are coming from the Supreme Court judgment. So they expect these ones to be implemented. So I am not surprised that they feel disappointed that those reforms have not taken place, because they were not part of the recommendations of the Supreme Court in the first place.
But you recall that after the ruling, the Electoral Commission had asked for recommendations from the political parties, and indeed it gave a deadline for submission. But afterwards, what would you say has been the response since you submitted your recommendations?
I think the Electoral Commission has made commendable progress on implementing the reforms that we put together under the auspices of the IEA. What is interesting is that the political party, MPP, which refused to submit proposals for reforms, they are all over the rooftop shouting the Electoral Commission has not implemented the reforms. You haven't submitted anything anyway in the first place. So why are you faulting the Electoral Commission for not implementing the reforms that have been proposed by other political parties?
So which of your recommendations were put to work?
I think that one of the most important things that the Supreme Court directed was that Electoral Commission should make an effort to finish the compilation of the register in good time so that political parties will have copies and have time to review those things and use them for whatever purposes they want to engage in. And I say that anybody who is very conversant with the electoral process knows that before Electoral Commission will be able to implement these things successfully, it has to take the cooperation and involvement of all political parties and all Ghanaians and the sitting government. So, because Electoral Commission will bring out their timetable in the first place, and then after the release of the timetable, they need resources to be released by the government so that they can work according to the timetable. They are also an institution that believes in rule of law. So immediately anybody goes to court with any frivolous complaint, then the timetable has to be stalled. All the activities at the Electoral Commission have to be stalled pending the determination of the case, as happened in 2012. They had to go through several, court suits and so on, leading into accumulated loss of time of about 3 months. So why do we turn around to be blaming them for not releasing the final, voters register in time, when we know that it is out of the activities of we ourselves that led to the consummation of all the time that is available, and nobody can stretch the year, nobody can stretch the number of hours in the day. So we have to be advising ourselves as citizens that if we want Electoral Commission timetable to be implemented in such a way that everybody will have enough time to do whatever they want to do, then we have to be very, very cautious when we are contemplating any court action. We have to let government also ensure that the commission will also have their resources on time so that they can work according to their own timetable. I do not think that the fault can be put at the doorsteps of Electoral Commission alone.
I see. So even in the cases of training, presiding officers, you believe it's because resources are not available. That's why the EC may not have, we may not have had anything with regards to that from the EC.
It's a very complex scenario. Those who are familiar with the electoral process will understand that you need to finish the compilation of the register. You need to put together the guidelines and other things that would have to be followed at the polling station before you proceed to train officers. So if you have not done all this, if they are stalled, then you cannot be training officers on a new system that you are yet to pilot. So you have to, it's a complete thing. You have to get the resources to do your registration, to put all the other systems you want to undertake before you go to train your officials as to how to implement those systems. And so you cannot be training electoral officials if they have to operate with a verification machine and you have not procured that verification machine. How do you train your officials? So it is a complex thing. That's why I'm advising that everybody has to play their part. But I would not accept that Electoral Commission as an institution alone should be blamed for these things. In 2012, MPP had to go to court on the choice of the contractor who will be implementing the biometric system. It led to a loss of time cumulatively for about 3 months. Now they turn around and tell us that the compilation of the register was delayed, and so they could not have copies in advance to be able to plan their campaign. You ask yourself now, who caused them? So if they are now very much aware that delay in the release of the register could affect the outcome of elections, then in all the activities, the political parties should be conscious of that fact and make sure that before they take any decision, they must weigh the pros and cons of going into frivolous litigation with the Electoral Commission. And I think that we will make a headway.
Some have also said that the EC is not collaborating well enough with the political parties. What would be your assessment a year on after the verdicts of the relationship between the Electoral Commission and the political parties?
The relationship of the Electoral Commission and the political parties has been very, very consistently the same from 92 to date.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It is a very good thing because political parties are the contestants. So they should not be dictating to the referee. And I'm surprised that MPP, when they are in government, were espousing these principles. So what has changed? That now that they are in opposition, they think that Electoral Commission should be at their beck and call. I don't think that that is good for us. This is a commission that has stood the test of time. They have conducted elections. All the major political parties have won and lost at one point in time or the other. And I think that the best thing we have now in our democracy is this Electoral Commission. And we must protect it and make sure that they do their work and continue doing their work well. And I hear people suggesting that Supreme Court has directed we should reorganize Electoral Commission. Some are saying because some judge has made a comment, so therefore the chairman of Electoral Commission must resign and so on. They are working against the principles of democracy. Even in Supreme Court, the principle of majority rule applies. So if you are looking at what Supreme Court directed, you must be looking at the judgment, the final judgment. You don't go and pick individual judges' comments, which ended up in minority, and then parading them as the recommendations of Supreme Court. So all those NGOs, political parties that are proposing ideas like the reorganization of the Electoral Commission, the appointment of the chairman of the Electoral Commission on the approval of Parliament, and so on. These are not recommendations coming from the Supreme Court. And I want somebody to come out and tell me that the Supreme Court did recommend that the Electoral Commission ought to be, as presently constituted, ought to be reorganized. I want somebody to tell me that the Supreme Court called on the resignation of the chairman of the Electoral Commission, or the Supreme Court called for the appointment of Electoral Commission members based on the approval of Parliament. These are all ideas. They are not bad in a way, but they must be presented as people's views that they want to bring along. They should not hide under a Supreme Court ruling.
Beyond electoral reforms, let's look at this way. Have we had general advancement in our system, in our democracy, after the verdicts a year ago?
We have had advancement. For instance, the law that allows us to use the health insurance card as evidence of citizenship and so on. That one has been tested, and the court has decided that we should not use that card. But again, I have my problem when people think that because somebody has gone to court and got the subsidiary legislation on these matters to be changed, it means the Electoral Commission is at fault. My God, we all decided as political parties. We formed a committee and then put our lawyers on this committee, and they generated this subsidiary legislation. And it is based on this legislation that we conducted the 2012 register. So if after Supreme Court you want the law to be changed, Electoral Commission by itself does not change laws. They operate with the laws that are existing. So if somebody through the judicial process has caused the law to be changed, why do you blame Electoral Commission?
We'll leave it here for now. Thank you very much, Johnson. Johnson Asiedu Nketia as General Secretary for the ruling NDC. We'll stay around the issues that have to do with a year after the historic verdict on the election petition. 2012 flag bearer of the NPP, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, says if there are any regrets from this election petition, it will be the worsening economic conditions in the country after the verdict. He has been appealing to the party to address that as president of Ghana. Let's now go to the Ashanti Regional Capital, Kumasi, where Akufo-Addo currently is, and talk to our correspondent, Mahmoud Mohammed Nuruddin. Hello, Nuruddin.
Hello, Kemini.
Tell us, what has he been doing there?
Kemini?
I'm asking, what has Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo been doing there?
Well, if I hear you clear, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo made a lot of statements about last year's election petition, and he mentioned that the EC will no longer encourage to tell someone to go to court because of what happened at the Supreme Court. And he also mentioned that with the experience the New Patriotic Party had last year, there will be a maximum vigilance in vigilance of party polling agents in subsequent elections. And he also mentioned the fact that the election petition will improve the electoral processes in the country. He agreed that it is painful to lose an election, but that should not come with a suspicion like what the NPP are claiming it happened in the 2012 election. So he made a lot of statements about the election petition, and he also spoke about the economic hardship in the country and called on Ghanaians to come together as one people to help solve the problems the country is currently facing.
Thank you very much, Nuruddin, for that update. Mahmoud Mohammed Nuruddin joined us from the Ashanti region. Exactly a year ago, August 29, 2013, Ghana Supreme Court declared President John Dramani Mahama as validly elected president. My colleague Roland Walker has been speaking with Dr. Maurice Ampao, president of the Legal Advocacy Foundation, on the effects the case may have had on the judiciary and the Electoral Commission. We spoke on the AM show.
So if you want to see how powerful judges are, they are God on earth. The judge, God Almighty is the God who will come and judge all of us. That's why the judges are powerful than the president and all the institutions. You see, because all the institutions, the president and everything, whatever the judge says is final. What the president says is all final. What the parliament says is all final. What everybody says in Ghana is all final. It takes the Supreme Court judges to say, and whatever they say is final. Therefore, you realize that they decide, and their decision is binding on all of us, and they are not subject to influence. They are not bound by the decision of any court outside the country. So you realize that because they were so powerful, and if you want to know how powerful judges are, look at the way they dress when they go to ceremonial functions. When somebody puts on red and then the gown and then the wig covering their ear, it shows how powerful, and then they are quiet because they don't want to use their power to inflict any injury on any member of the society. So our judges are very powerful, and the Supreme Court leadership petition actually brought that to 4. And you realize that that's why some of us were disappointed when the Supreme Court, by the majority, said that, look, as for them, once elections is over, they are there to rather preserve public elections, meaning that whatever Afari-Jan and Co and the EC said should be final, and we were not comfortable with that stand.
Now, we had the issue of polling agents come up, and also brought into sharp focus the activities of the Electoral Commission and how perhaps supreme we thought they were, and how good in terms of the work they were doing. When their witness came to the box, Dr. Kwadwo Afari-Gyan, who was the chairman of the Electoral Commission. How did that play out?
Before the election petition, we all thought that the Electoral Commission was untouchable, was unaccountable. He doesn't account to anybody. He's so independent, and that posture, that ENTOBR posture, was exhibited by Afari-Gyan. You realize that he will come in when people make suggestions and come and rubbish almost all the suggestions, and then come and say that, look, we are independent. So he didn't give room for more consultation, and you realize that posture, he ignored even increase the number of people, the constituencies. So many suggestions were made to the EC by civil society, the opposition, members of parliament, even the government. Afari-Gyan said no. So it was after the election, during the election period, when he was brought to come and account for his stewardship, then we saw how weak the Electoral Commission can be. And you can remember that Justice Atuguba said, look, After the end of his case and he was discharged, he said, next time, tell people that go to court, go to court. You think going to court is easy because you'll be subjected to scrutiny, interrogations, and then it exposed the issue so much that we all realized that the voter register did not have that level of credibility, and it was not made available.
Well, the National Disaster Management Organization has alerted residents in the catchment area of the White Volta to the spillage of the Bagre Dam in Burkina Faso from Friday, August 29. The spillage, which will continue gradually until the water level normalizes, follows the rapid rise in the water level of that dam. Areas to be affected by the spillage include the northern, upper, east, eastern and Volta regions. Well, I'm joined over the telephone by our Upper East Regional Correspondent, Albert Story, to give us an update on the response to this warning. Hello, Albert.
Hello, Kemi.
You're welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Albert, what's been the reaction since this announcement?
Nothing much. The announcement came yesterday. The Burkinabe authorities sent a correspondence through the Regional Coordinating Council for announcements to be made on radio and other media for people who live around the White Volta basin to be aware that the village of the dam will start today.
Okay.
And so it doesn't look like so many people would have heard it by now. But I've been speaking to the regional NADMO coordinator this morning, and he says that they have already sent out information to all the people. What happens is that they have some community volunteers in all the communities here who have been trained in managing flood disasters. And so these volunteers coordinate with NADMO when things like this come up.
Okay.
So
now, Albert, I'm going to have you host the line. Alfred Sewuk, who is the Upper East NADMO coordinator, has joined our conversation. Alfred, you're welcome to the program, Alfred.
Thank you.
How many people are to be affected by the spillage?
We have about 63 major communities along the White Volta Basin in the Upper East region. And by our estimation, 8,544 people are expected to be affected by the spillage of the Bagre Dam.
I see. Now, beyond sending announcements or warning notices to these people who live along the White Volta and would be affected by the spillage, what more are we going to see NADMO do?
The activities that we have been undertaken by way of mitigation and prevention hasn't started today. Since the beginning of the rainy season and when the rain started becoming serious, we have been receiving information from our Burkinabe counterparts on the water level in the Bagre Dam. So the activities that we have been undertaken by way of mitigation and prevention started, let me say, about 2 weeks ago. One major activity that we have undertaken is by way of sensitizing and educating the people in the communities along the White Volta Basin. We have brought relevant information on flood disasters to the doorsteps of these people through debate, community meetings, and also using information vans and radio. But just like Albert mentioned, one important strategy has to do with training. We have disaster volunteer groups in these communities, and we have also tried to develop their capacities so that they can help us when the floods come. We have also reviewed and activated our regional, district, and municipal disaster management plans. We have also brought disaster management planning to the doorsteps of our people. That is, we have sent it to the community level. So,
right. So Alfred, if I live in any of these communities to be affected, I understand all your intentions and the things you're putting together, but I would want something more concrete. Do I have to move out of my home? What sort of help am I getting when I move out of my home? What answers do you have to these questions?
Well, interestingly, we don't have houses directly in the water basin. What we are talking about are farms that are along the wide water basin, but we don't have houses directly in the basin where we say that houses will be inundated and people will have to get out of their homes. But our concern has to do with people undertaking farming activities along the river basin, people taking care of their animals along the river basin, people undertaking fishing activities in the rivers, and also those who want to or attempt to cross to other communities to undertake other activities. These are our concerns. So
now, for those who farm and rear livestock, that is their livelihood, which will be taken away by virtue of its location. What sort of help is getting to them?
Well, as part of our work, once they are affected, the necessary assessment will be done in conjunction with our collaborators, especially MOFA. We'll get to know the extent of the damage, and then NADMO will see if to give them some assistance.
What are we calling assessment here? It isn't the first time the Bagri Dam would have a spillover. It isn't the first time NADMO would have to deal with this. Don't we already have foresight of the extent of damage, an estimate of what it could look like, and the kind of help you could give these people, than wait for the spillage and then the flooding before you do an assessment?
Yeah, of course, we have what we call secondary data. We can foretell what will happen. The spillage has become an annual ritual. We know what is likely to happen. But that doesn't mean that when it happens, we shouldn't do any assessment. The assessment is necessary because we would have to collect data. The data will inform us as to what the people actually need, and it will also help in planning purposes for the future. So, yeah, we have secondary data, we have the experience, we can foresee what will happen. But when it happens, it's still necessary that we do an assessment.
One would imagine that previous experiences would have given us some of these things you've spoken about. For instance, what sort of help you should give the people? Why should we wait for their livelihood to be taken away from them? Then we now assess the situation of what they could need, by which time, you never know.
Yeah, you know, it is not that we are waiting. You know, what we should know is that what is going to happen is a natural stroke man-made disaster. And it is not something that we can prevent. So it is not that we are waiting. It is a natural event, and it will definitely happen. But what we can do now is to let the people know that this is what is likely to happen. These are likely to be the effects, and then what they should try to do to prevent the hazard from affecting them. So that is the key thing now.
Now, Alfred, I'm gonna have you hold your thoughts just for a bit. Our original correspondent, Albert, he's been interacting with some of these residents to be affected by this village. Albert, thanks for your patience there. What have these people been telling you as far as what they may need is concerned?
Well, just like he said, there aren't people who live directly in the basin, but there are people who often, if the floods are serious, whose houses are not necessarily close to the basin, but sometimes can get flooded because the areas are low-lying. I can give you examples of places like Sawaba, places like even Smith. these people live in low-lying areas, and sometimes even when the rains are heavy enough, they find their homes getting flooded. And so they are worried that if the spillage is done, because in recent times there have been quite a number of rains, and so these places, which are always muddy, have become very wet, and they don't know what is going to happen. It will depend on the extent of the spillage we are going to see.
Albert, thank you very much for that information. We'll leave the conversation there. Alfred, finally, how prepared is NADMO financially and in terms of logistics for this?
Well, I think NADMO is prepared. Just like I mentioned earlier on, the training has been done, our plans have been activated, the information has gone down to the communities. We have identified early warning signs and signals and put an early warning system in place. We are also coordinating with the necessary stakeholders. NADMO as an organization doesn't work in isolation. We are trying to see how we can harness the material and human resources that we have and our collaborators to have, so that together we can work to achieve a common goal. So
Alfred, thank you very much for your time. Alfred Sawug is Upper East NADMO coordinator. Let's turn attention to some cholera-related issues. Some 8,000 cases have so far been recorded in the Greater Accra region alone. Health authorities are worried the public is not simply adhering to sensitization campaigns being undertaken by health personnel. Greater Accra Director of the Ghana Health Service, Dr. Linda Van Otu, told Joy News the service will continue the campaign and hopes the public will change its attitude.
Apart from talking about the human life, unfortunately we have lost some. The time that you as an individual will lose in doing your business, we are also spending money with infusions, with the giving sets, and with the needle, if you like. All that put together is a lot.
Does the service has enough money to battle this cholera? Now it's an epidemic.
Yes, it is. Therefore, whether we have money or we don't, we will. But we need money to do this. You see, there's a need for our disease control officers, our public health nurses, the community health nurses, to move into the communities, to continue with the public education. That takes money.
Where's the money coming from?
For now, we expect people to do that. The money is now coming from us as the health sector. Yes, but we expect, because there's more that needs to be done. In fact, managing this outbreak would need a lot of money, because it's not just about those who are coming, but those who are in the community who have not yet come, and we hope they don't. We need to get to them to let them know, and to move every day into the community to educate the public as to what to do entails money.